Okay, today we're doing section 6-6. We are skipping 6-5, okay? We are skipping 6-5. And that is because I'm going to just refer to our chart. So when we first do a problem, we start with the GCF. If I'm given a binomial, after I take my GCF out, if I end with a binomial, if I have a binomial, the only kind of binomial that can be factored is the difference of squares. If I have a sum of squares, it can't be factored. If I just have a regular old binomial, it can't be factored unless it's a GCF. If I have a trinomial, we have three kinds that we're learning about. Trinomial squares we've learned about. We've learned when the lead coefficient is a 1 in regular trinomial factoring, like when it's x squared. What we haven't learned is when a is not 1, when it's 3x. This is the hardest form of factoring. Okay? I'm going to come back to that. Now, the other option is we could end with a binomial, we could have a trinomial, or we could have 4 or more. If we have 4 or more, we do something called factor by grouping. Okay? We're going to take a break from this for a day. We're going to learn how to do this because I use this factor by grouping to teach lead coefficient factoring. Okay? That's why we're skipping a section. Is everybody clear? We're on 6-6. All right, so let's start with greatest monomial factors. If I have this expression, what would be the greatest monomial factor, or GCF? X, right? I pull an x out, I factor an x out, and I'm left with what? A plus 3. Notice the a plus 3 goes into the parentheses, right? Okay, we're going to do the same thing, only this time we're going to do it with a polynomial. Okay, so if I have this, notice each of these are terms because they're tied together by multiplication. What do those terms have in common? Yes. Y plus 5. They have a binomial in common. So I'm going to factor out an actual binomial. Okay? And we are left with what? Remember what I was left with? I put in the parentheses. What's left when I pull out the y plus 5, Dylan?
A plus b.
A plus b. Do you see that? The a is left. And the b is left. Just like when I was left with a here. And the 3, we put them into the parentheses. We're going to put these, the a plus b, into the parenthesis. You guys with me? Okay, that's what we call a binomial factor. Okay, they're each binomial factors. All right, so now I'm given actual polynomial. I see 4 terms. I'm going to see if I can factor by grouping. I'm noticing that these have a factor in common. And these have a factor in common. So I'm going to factor and see if this works. What factor does the first group have in common? M. And so when I pull out an M, what's left? A plus. Can I really pull out an M out of the first 2? No, there's no common factor of M. So what can I pull out? An A. And when I pull out that A, what's left, Nadine?
M plus 4.
Good. Okay, I'm also noticing that this has a common factor. What factor can I pull out, Anthony?
3.
Positive 3. And so what would be left, Anthony?
M plus 4.
Oh, so now what I'm seeing is that common binomial factor. So we can pull out the common binomial factor, m plus 4, and what would be left? What? A plus 3. Is that making sense? Okay, let's move on. Okay, so what would be the common binomial factor that I would pull out, or what could I factor out of number 1? Chris?
Y plus 3.
Good. And what's left? X plus K. Okay, pause the recording and do 2 and 3. Go. Recording. Okay, so how are we on number 2? What did you get? Let's go, Cheyenne.
I got the quantity of x plus 2 times the quantity of x squared plus 3.
Good. Okay. Next, number 3. Let's go with Robert.
Quantity of t minus 4 times the quantity of 5 minus x.
And it doesn't matter the order that you put them in. Okay, number 4. Remember, we're going to group. Uh-oh. I have 4 terms, so I'm grouping. So what can I factor out of the first group?
A.
And what's left?
P minus 3.
Good. And out of the second group? What am I factoring out?
B.
Plus B. The sign included. What's left? P minus 3. So my final answer is P minus 3 times A plus B. Now you guys do number 5. Pause the recording. Okay, let's check our work. Let's go. Nadine, what am I factoring out of the first group?
A.
And what's left?
B minus 1.
B minus 1. Okay. Next, what am I factoring out? How about Rachel?
You're factoring out positive c.
Positive C. What's left?
B minus 1.
B minus 1. I have a common binomial factor. Final answer is, Charlotte?
The quantity of B minus 1 times the quantity of A plus C.
Good. Okay, questions? All right, moving on. So now we're going to put it like, the thing is sometimes they're not so pretty and organized. And so you may have to move things around. There's a couple different ways I could move it around. One way I could do, let's see, like right here, I have a common factor here, but there's no common factor here, right? So we could move it around, let's do 3x plus 3a plus x squared plus ax. Or I could do it x squared plus 3x plus 3a plus ax, yeah. Okay? All right, so if I do the first way, what am I factoring out? A 3, and then I'm left with x plus a. And then what am I factoring out of the second group? Plus x, and I'm left with x plus a. Now what can I factor out next? The binomial factor, x plus a, right? And I'm left with 3 plus x. If I had done it the other way, what do I factor out? X, and I'm left with x plus 3. Oh, what do you know? It's that other factor. Okay? And here I can factor out an a plus a, and I'm left with 3 plus x, or x plus 3, right? Same thing? Yeah. So it ends up being x plus a times x plus 3. And if you FOIL it back, you end up with this. We always check ourselves by FOILing. Are you guys clear on this?
Yes.
Okay, so now let's add some negatives to the mix. Or, you know what? Let's do number 1. Go. You guys do number 1. You can see we might have to reorder things. Pause the recording and do number 1. All right, so we could have grouped it, moved the 2x and the 6 around and done the 3n with the 6. I'm going to group the first group, right? So I'm grouping this, and I pull out the x. I'm grouping this, and I pull out the 3, and my final answer is n plus 2 times the quantity of x plus 3. Are there any questions? All right, so let's move on and go on to negatives and positives. Okay, so tell me, what is the opposite of x?
Negative x.
Good. The opposite of 8?
Negative 8.
Good. The opposite of x plus 3.
Negative x minus 3.
Good. Or negative times the quantity, which gives me negative x minus 3. What happens if I have a minus b? Negative a plus b, or can't we say b minus a? So if I need to move something around and I multiply it by a negative 1, it changes both signs. So how would the next one look? Yes?
5 minus c.
5 minus c. You guys with me? Okay. How about the next one? The opposite of 5y squared minus 4. Everybody. You get the idea? Okay. Sometimes, now, what are the factors of this? If I look at what are the factors of 1, I could say it's negative 1 times the opposite of negative x, right? To get that negative x. What's the factors of b? Negative 1 times negative b. Are you with me? So if it's positive, I could just say it's the opposite times. What about number 3? Negative 1 times what would give you that? Yes?
Negative 1 times a plus 5.
Yep. What would the next one be? Yep.
Negative 1 times 4 minus x.
Yes. You getting it? Okay, next one. Next one, what would it be? Everybody? Back row. Back row. Okay, now, I'm going to move on from here. Okay, so now we have something. Let's look at this next one. I'm going to remind you we are recording. Okay, so the first one, I'll just group them first. You may have to reorganize, but we're going to group, right? Write this as sample down. So let's just say, what can we factor out of the first group?
X.
And what's left?
B minus 9.
Oh, okay. So now, I'm going to factor out a plus 2. And what's left?
9 minus b.
See how that's opposite? How can I make it be different? What could I have done instead? To make them become opposite, yes.
Multiply the second.
We don't multiply. We're not multiplying. What am I doing to that group?
Oh, you factor the second group by negative 2?
By negative 2, and then I'm left with b minus 9. Are you guys with me? And now what I have is b minus 9 times x minus 2. Okay. All right. Let's try the... I'm almost so much out of time. I've got like 5 minutes left. Okay, you want to try number 2? Do number 2 very quickly. Go. Okay, let's check it. As I group, what am I pulling out of the first one?
K.
I can pull out a k, and I'm left with x squared minus 5. Okay, what else can I pull out? So if I pull out a negative 3, then I'm left with,
X squared.
this becomes a negative 5, and that becomes a positive, so x squared minus 5. And now we've got k minus 3 times squared minus 5. Got it? Okay, so you got the negative thing down. Sometimes, if it doesn't look like you can take anything out, try taking a plus 1. If it looks like there's nothing, just take a plus 1. Or take a negative 1 if you need it to be just opposite. Does that make sense? One of these, like here, I just needed to make it become the opposite. So, let's go on to now more complex. We're going to be factoring. They're all going to be mixed together. What's the very first step we do? Always, always, always. GCF. There's a 2. If you leave that 2 in there, okay, you will be, I guarantee you will forget about it and forget to factor it later. So GCF it. Now, I put those braces because now I've got to do some grouping in here. Right? So now within those braces, I've got that 2 outside. Temporarily, I'm going to factor out a p, and I'm left with x plus 4. What are we factoring out of the next group? Plus 3, and I'm left with x plus 4. So what are my two binomials? Anthony? X plus 4 times what?
P plus 3.
But do not forget that 2. You add that GCF of a 2. If you don't do that, I can't tell you how many people get that wrong because they leave out the 2. All right, is that one clear? Okay, let's move on to the next complex one. Okay, is there a GCF? No, nothing that all terms have in common. So I'm going to go with factor by grouping. Step 1, let's finish this. What am I factoring out? How about a y squared? What's left in the first one?
X squared minus 1.
Good. Now, next one. What am I factoring out?
9.
Plus 9?
Minus 9.
Minus 9. This will become negative. What? What am I left with? X squared minus 1. Now, I'm left with y squared minus 9 times x squared minus 1. Am I done?
Yeah.
No! Sorry for recording. Sorry. We are left with a difference in squares. You're killing me. So it's y plus 3 times y minus 3 times x plus 1 times x minus 1. And there is no way to simplify that. Sorry, Mr. Recording. Pause the recording and go do your homework.